we really have to be careful, because fatigue can have us questioning God. But all along, it's really our strength that's gone. What's going on, my curious and intellectual people? Welcome back to Intriguing Insights, where deep conversations meet everyday life, looking beyond the obvious to uncovering meaning, challenge assumption, and find wisdom in places most people overlook. Now, we'll be closing off this section, Faith Under Pressure, with our last topic. Fatigue changes what you believe about God. So, we started off this section saying, faith feels empty, but not because God is useless, mainly because our motives are wrong. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with the Bible, but today I'm going to share another scripture which shows why I'm saying about our motives. My little trusty to go get. So, the Berean Standard Bible. I don't like that translation. Hold on, y'all. It's gonna give me a little more second. That translation is really not my preference. So I'm gonna change my translation here. For those that already have their actual Bible, I'm going to James chapter 4, verse 1 to 3. Homans. I like the Holman Christian Standard Bible. For all those that listen to some of my other podcasts, you know. For those that don't, surprise. So James chapter 4, verse 1. What is the source of wars and fights among you? It's a rhetorical question. Don't they come from the cravings that are at war within you? 2. You desire and do not have. You murder and covenant and cannot obtain. You fight and war and you do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, so that you may spend it on your evil desires. I'm not going to go into full detail, but here it basically says that, you know, we war and we fight about things that we want, that we desire, that we crave, and we even go to the point of murderous, like covenant, when you're jealous, envious of something else, that you tend to want to take something from someone else, so you technically would take them off the map. And you do these things because you do not ask, and we're typically asking from God. But asking is not the only thing that's going to get it. Then he goes on to say, but when you do ask, you don't receive it because your motives are wrong, meaning your heart's intentions are wrong. You really want it to spend on evil desires rather than doing it for God's goodness, gracious, and mercy. So, as I was stating, we see God as being useless when he technically is not useless. It's just that our motives are wrong. So we end up concluding from that episode that God is not useful, but relational. And when I say that he's not useful, meaning that he is not an object to be used for our benefit, like a genie, vending machine, wish list, stuff like that, but rather relational, meaning like someone that you want to be in a relationship where how a relationship operates. There's a give and take. Then we move to God feels distant, but he's actually there and speaking. We just can't hear him over life's busyness and distractions. Now, the last episode, we emphasized the significance of honest faith, not the pretending version that God adores, but the real and raw, broken but honest version of ourselves. But all this can be exhausting to us spiritually. This fatigue can distort what we believe about God. You know why? Because fatigue reveals theology. Now, to put it simply, theology is just a fancy word for study of God. And everybody has a theology. Even if you do not believe that God exists, period. It's basically a set of beliefs or rules regarding God. Whether he exists or don't, that's a theology. Whether you don't think he interacts with people, that's a theology. So anything that you have a belief system for or about, or not even about him, is technically a theology. Fatigue is more than just physical tiredness. It seeps into our minds and our hearts, suddenly altering the way we perceive everything, including our beliefs about God. When exhaustion sets in, our spiritual lens becomes clouded, leading us to doubts, frustration, and even feeling distance from the divine. It exposes what we actually believe about God because our guards are down. We can no longer put up the strengths and capabilities and the faculties that we had with strong faith when we were doing good because we're fatigued. We don't have the capacity to withstand that control abilities that we had once before to pray long, serve God, and love people. The truth of ourselves are now exposed because we don't have that ability to hold it together. When physical, emotional, and spiritual strength are depleted, our true idols, self-reliance, perfectionism, and our need for control are brought to the surface. And I have 3 practices to share about this concept. Number 1, it exposes what we worship, idolatry. When we're exhausted, our response reveals what we prioritize over God. Number 2, it reveals our human limitations. Fatigue is a physical reminder that we are just a creature and not the creator. We're made from dust. Number 3, it serves as a door to deeper faith. While fatigue can be a result of a falling world, it can also be used by God to deepen a person's relationship with him. So we're just not going to look at fatigue as something that is a part of our sin nature or something that I failed in and it was a bad thing and there's no coming back from it. We look at it from a positive aspect. When I'm fatigued, what is God trying to tell me in this situation? What idol am I showing that I am putting before him? What limitation that I am allowing to be the God that serves me in times like this rather than the God who created me? And am I allowing this situation to bring me to God, or am I allowing it for me to wallow in my sorrow? Because one thing I know, tired people distorts the things that we believe about God. Being fatigued affects the brain to process emotions and to reason clearly, which is why when we're tired, we're more prone to negative thinking and less able to access hope and trust. This often leads to questions like, is God really listening? Or why does God allow suffering? These questions, born from exhaustion, can feel overwhelming and shake our foundational belief. It clouds our perspective, making it harder to view God's true character, resulting in a view of God as harsh, distant, unloving, and demanding, rather than loving and merciful. Now, on the other hand, rest corrects beliefs. Taking time to ease from work and striving allows us to shift from a posture of fear, anxiety, and self-reliance to trust, faith, and dependence on God. Recognizing that fatigue alters perception is the first step to regaining spiritual clarity. Rest, both physically and emotional, are essential. Practices like prayer, my go-to, meditation, or just pause to breathe can reconnect us with our faith beyond the fog of tiredness. And even sometimes just sharing doubts with a trusted friend or a mentor can help with perspective and reassurance. We see God clearly when we're whole. And wholeness in this context is not about being perfect. But what it is about being honest, pure in heart, and having your brokenness healed by God's grace. It's when your inner personhood is aligned, mended, and not fragmented by sin, distraction, and inner pain. It's what gives us the ability to perceive God's presence, character, and purpose with clarity. When we are mentally, emotionally, and spiritually stable, we are less clouded by pain, fear, and confusion. This clarity makes it easier to interpret things like faith, purpose, and God's presence in a healthy, grounded way. So, the clearer and more healed we are internally, the clearer we perceive God. Not because he changed, but because our lens do. So you remember the verse from yesterday, right? Matthew 23:25. Trusting. Pull it up. I want to share it one more time, just so we can see what Jesus was stating to them. We're going to read 25 and 26. He says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside you are full of greed and self-indulge. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup, so the outside of it may also become clean." Again, we're going to point out the fact that he pointed out inside it, you're full of greed and self-indulgence. That's the thing that we were talking about from James chapter 4. We ask and we do not receive because our motives are wrong to spend it on our selfish, evil desires. The inside of the cup is not being clean, and they're being revealed when we're fatigued. And God is trying to show us something internally. And he's saying, clean the inside of the cup so that the outside may also be clean. So, in summary, fatigue does not just wear out our bodies. It reshapes our spiritual vision. So, by acknowledging this, we can approach our beliefs with compassion and patience, allowing rest and reflection to restore our connection with God. And this journey through fatigue can ultimately lead through a richer, enduring faith. So, let's not define God through exhaustion. Remember, clarity doesn't come from easy answers, but from the courage to ask the hard ones. So stay curious, stay open, and keep looking deeper. Peace.